The morning light spilled gently through the curtains, painting soft lines of gold across the quiet kitchen. The sound of a ticking clock filled the silence. Slow and steady, the kind of sound that reminded you time never stopped. Even when life felt like it had, Sarah stood by the counter, waiting for the coffee machine to finish its slow drip. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because sometimes that little gesture made her feel less alone. The steam from the cup curled in front of her face, warm against the cool stillness of the house. Her husband, David, had already left for work. He always did. He was careful, thoughtful, reliable, the kind of man who never forgot to lock the door or fill the car tank before a long drive. But in recent months, his words had grown fewer, his smiles quieter. Conversations that once flowed easily between them now felt like ripples fading into silence. Still, Sarah loved him. She always had. She glanced at the small framed photo on the table their wedding day. Sunlight on her hair, laughter in her eyes. That was 8 years ago. Back then, everything had felt full, every day bright with newness. Every evening, a promise that tomorrow would be even better. But now, life had turned into a rhythm of routines. Morning coffee, evening dishes, a few shared glances across the dinner table before the quiet settled in again. She missed something, though she couldn't quite name it. It wasn't adventure or excitement. It was something softer, something smaller. A feeling of being seen, understood, cherished for who she was beneath the calm exterior. As the clock ticked toward 9. Sarah set her empty cup in the sink and reached for her purse. She had started working part-time at a small design studio downtown. It wasn't much, but it gave her days meaning, colors to fill in the quiet spaces of her life. The bus stop was only a short walk away, and the air outside carried the faint smell of rain on pavement. She liked mornings like this when the world felt half awake, and she could almost imagine it was waiting for her. On the ride to work, Sarah stared out the window, watching the city drift past old brick houses, flower shops opening for the day, children tugging their parents toward school gates. It was all so ordinary, yet somehow she felt like she was standing just outside of it, watching a life she used to belong to. When she reached the studio, her coworkers greeted her kindly, and she smiled in return. She was good at smiling, gentle, polite, never too much. But beneath that calmness lived a quiet ache, a longing she rarely allowed herself to name. During lunch, she sat by the window sketching in her notebook. She often drew scenes she'd never visited, fields at dusk, winding country roads, oceans under silver skies. It was her small escape, her way of dreaming without words. That afternoon, as the rain finally began to fall, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from David. Asterisk, working late. Don't wait up. Asterisk, she stared at the screen for a moment, her thumb hovering above the reply button. Then she typed asterisk, okay, be safe, and set the phone down. It wasn't anger she felt, just a familiar kind of sadness, quiet and patient, like the sound of rain against glass. When the day ended, Sarah gathered her things and stepped outside. The street was slick with water, glowing under the pale light of street lamps. The bus schedule showed she had missed the last one by 5 minutes. She sighed, brushing damp hair from her face, wondering if she should call a cab. Then, through the drizzle, a car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and a warm voice called out, "Need a ride home?" It was Daniel, her husband's boss. He was older than David by a few years, known around the office for his calm presence and thoughtful manner. Sarah had met him only a handful of times, usually at company dinners or events. He had always seemed kind, though somewhat reserved. "Sarah, it's pouring," he said with a gentle smile. "Let me give you a lift. I'd hate to see you wait out here." For a moment, she hesitated. It wasn't that she distrusted him. It was just that the offer felt unexpected, like a small turn in an otherwise ordinary day. But the rain was getting heavier, and his tone carried nothing but sincerity. "Thank you," she said softly, opening the door and stepping inside. The car was warm, the faint scent of pine lingering in the air. As Daniel pulled away from the curb, Sarah stared out at the rain, droplets racing down the window like quiet thoughts she couldn't hold on to. The drive began in comfortable silence. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low and kind. "It's a quiet night, isn't it? Makes you think about things?" Sarah nodded. "It does." He smiled faintly, eyes on the road. "Sometimes the quiet says more than words ever could." She turned to look at him then. Just briefly, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something stir inside her. Not attraction, not confusion, but recognition, a reminder that she was still someone who felt deeply, who dreamed quietly, who still longed to be truly understood. As the car continued through the rain, Sarah looked back toward the glowing city lights, and somewhere in her heart, she knew that this simple ride home would change something within her, though she couldn't yet tell how. The rain had stopped by the time Daniel's car pulled up to Sarah's street. The world outside glimmered with quiet reflections, puddles catching light from passing cars, leaves clinging softly to the wet pavement. Sarah thanked him and stepped out, her heart carrying a stillness she didn't quite understand. That night, after changing into a warm sweater, she sat by the window with a cup of tea. The sky was dark but peaceful, filled with the faint hum of distant traffic and the soft tapping of raindrops, still falling from the trees. She thought about Daniel's words. Sometimes the quiet says more than words ever could. They had stayed with her, echoing softly like a tune from long ago. And somehow, that thought opened a door she hadn't visited in years. It was the memory of another quiet connection, one that had once meant everything to her. She had been 24 back then, full of bright hopes and quiet fears. It was the year she met Ethan. Ethan wasn't someone who demanded attention. He was gentle, a little shy, but he had a way of listening that made people feel heard. Sarah had met him at a community art class, both of them sitting at opposite ends of a long table filled with brushes, paints, and laughter. One afternoon, as the class worked in near silence, Ethan had looked over and said, almost hesitantly, "You always draw windows." Sarah glanced down at her sketch, a small cottage with light pouring from its windows into the night. She smiled. "I like them. They make me think of stories waiting to be told." He'd tilted his head, studying her drawing with quiet admiration. "Then maybe every window you draw is a little piece of your heart." She remembered laughing softly at that, thinking how strange and yet beautiful it sounded. From that day on, they talked more, not about grand things, but about the small details that made up their lives. Favorite songs, the smell of rain, what they thought happiness might mean. There had been no promises between them, no confessions. Just the quiet comfort of two souls who understood each other without needing to explain too much. On rainy days, they'd walk home together, their umbrellas brushing as they moved through the mist. Sometimes he'd tell her stories about his travels, the people he'd met, the art he wanted to create. And Sarah would listen, her heart gently filling with something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't love. Not exactly, or maybe it was, in the quietest way possible. But life, as it often does, moved in its own direction. Ethan received a job offer in another city, a chance he couldn't refuse. On his last day at the art studio, he handed Sarah a small sketchbook wrapped in a brown ribbon. "I thought you might like this," he said, smiling a little, "to keep drawing your windows." She opened it and found a note inside the cover, * for the stories you haven't told yet. * when he left. Sarah felt something in her world shift, not break, but gently change shape. For weeks afterward, she would glance at that empty chair beside her in class and feel a space where his laughter used to be. Eventually, time softened the edges of that memory. She met David, fell in love, and built a new life. Her world became steady, safe, and full of things to be grateful for. But every now and then, especially on quiet, rainy nights, she would find herself wondering where Ethan had gone. If he ever finished the paintings he'd talked about. If he ever thought of her even for a passing moment. Now, sitting by her window years later, Sarah opened her old sketchbook, the one with the brown ribbon, slightly faded but still beautiful. The pages carried faint traces of graphite and watercolor. each drawing a small memory frozen in time. There was the window from the first house she and David had rented, the one from her grandmother's kitchen. And near the back one, she remembered painting with Ethan watching beside her, a window half open, with light spilling softly into the night. She traced the edges of that sketch with her fingertips, her heart swelling with quiet nostalgia. It wasn't longing, not in the way people often think of it. It was more like gratitude, a gentle thankfulness for the moments that had shaped her, for the people who had seen her, understood her, even if only for a brief while. The past didn't hurt anymore. It simply existed like an echo carried on the wind, soft, distant, but still alive in its own quiet way. Sarah closed the sketchbook and looked out the window once more. The moon had risen behind a thin veil of clouds, washing the world in silver light. Somewhere far away, a car passed by, its headlights gliding over the wet road like a memory fading into the distance. She smiled faintly to herself, whispering under her breath, "Thank you." Ethan, it wasn't about what could have been, it was about what was, and how it had helped her become who she was now. And as she turned off the light and walked toward her room, she felt lighter, as though a part of her heart had finally made peace with the echo of her past. The morning sun broke gently through the thin veil of clouds, painting golden streaks across the quiet streets. The world was slowly waking, shopkeepers setting out signs, children hurrying to school, the faint hum of life returning to its steady rhythm. Sarah stood at the entrance of the city's community center, a folder clutched to her chest. Her design studio had recently partnered with a local charity for an art exhibit, one that celebrated community and memory through painting. It felt like something special, something that mattered. She had volunteered to help organize the display. Inside, the large hall smelled faintly of paint and fresh coffee. Canvases lined the walls, some bright and bold, others soft and quiet. As she walked between them, adjusting a frame here and straightening a label there, she felt a calm sense of purpose. That was when she heard a familiar voice behind her, low, warm, unmistakable, still making the world a little more beautiful. "I see." Sarah froze. For a moment she wondered if her memory was playing tricks on her. Slowly she turned around. There he was, Ethan. He looked almost exactly as she remembered, the same thoughtful eyes, the same calm smile, only a little older, with lines that spoke of years lived and lessons learned. He stood a few feet away, holding a rolled canvas under his arm, rain still glistening faintly on his coat. "Ethan." She breathed, the name barely finding its way out. "I saw your name on the exhibit brochure," he said gently. "I thought it couldn't be the same Sarah, but I guess I was wrong." Sarah felt her heart flutter with a strange, familiar warmth. "It's been, what, 10 years?" "Almost 11, he replied, smiling softly. "You still remember?" She laughed lightly, though her voice carried a tremor. Some memories don't really fade. For a moment, silence settled between them, not awkward but tender, filled with all the words neither had said in years. Around them, the quiet buzz of the exhibit continued. But it felt as though the world had gently slowed down. They walked together along the gallery wall, pausing to admire the paintings. Ethan's canvas, the one he had brought with him, depicted a small cottage under a pale evening sky, its windows glowing softly from within. Sarah's breath caught. "You still paint windows?" He glanced at her, smiling in quiet recognition. "I guess some habits never change." She looked closer, tracing the light and shadow with her eyes. "This one feels peaceful, like it belongs somewhere safe." Ethan nodded, his voice calm. "It's what I've been chasing all these years. Peace. And maybe the memory of people who taught me what it looks like." Their eyes met then, just for a moment, and it was enough. Neither of them spoke, but something passed between them, a gentle acknowledgement of the bond that had once existed, and perhaps still quietly did, as the day went on. They talked about the years between, not in great detail, but in small, meaningful pieces. Ethan told her about the cities he'd lived in, the art projects that had kept him busy. Sarah shared stories about her design work, her marriage, her quiet little home near the park, Every word felt easy, natural, as though time had folded neatly between them. When the afternoon light began to fade, Sarah glanced at the clock. I should head out soon. My husband's expecting me. Ethan nodded, his expression understanding, but his tone held a softness that words couldn't quite define. Of course. I'm glad I ran into you, Sarah. She smiled. Me too. It's strange, isn't it? How life brings people back at the right time. He looked out the window where the first drops of rain had begun to fall again. Maybe life knows when we need a reminder of who we used to be. She studied him quietly, wondering if he knew how true that was. When she finally stepped outside, the cool air brushed against her face. She pulled her scarf a little tighter and looked back through the glass doors of the hall. Ethan was still inside, talking to one of the event organizers, his hands moving expressively as he spoke. And just for a second, he looked up. Their eyes met once more through the glass. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. And she returned it before walking away. As she made her way down the damp sidewalk, Sarah felt an unexpected calm settle over her. There was no confusion, no lingering ache, only warmth, like the echo of an old song that once meant everything. Now gently fading into the distance, seeing Ethan again hadn't reopened old wounds. It had reminded her that those memories had never truly been painful. They were simply part of who she was, moments that had helped her grow, love, and understand what truly mattered that evening. When Sarah stepped into her home, she found David setting the table for dinner. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, you're home early." She smiled back, taking in the simple comfort of his presence. "Yeah, just a long day." As they sat together, talking softly about their plans for the weekend, Sarah's thoughts drifted back once more to the gallery, to that brief meeting with Ethan, to the window painted in golden light, and she realized that sometimes fate doesn't bring people back to change your life. It brings them back to remind you how far you've come. The days after the exhibit felt unusually calm, as though the world had slowed to let Sarah catch her breath. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, the hum of the coffee machine in the morning, the sound of rain against the kitchen window, the quiet comfort of evenings spent beside David. Yet, beneath the calm, something had shifted. Seeing Ethan again had stirred something soft within her. Not longing, not regret, but recognition. A reminder of who she had once been and how far she had come since then. One afternoon, as Sarah sat at her desk reviewing designs for an upcoming project, she received a message from the gallery's coordinator. Ethan asked if you could stop by today. He left something for you. Her heart hesitated before her thoughts did. That evening, as the sky turned dusky pink, Sarah walked back into the quiet gallery. The lights were dim, the exhibits now half taken down. A few canvases leaned against the wall, and among them, Ethan stood, carefully wrapping one in brown paper. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I got your message," she said softly. "You wanted to see me?" Ethan smiled faintly, setting the wrapped painting on a nearby table. "I wanted to give you something before I head back home." "You're leaving?" He nodded. "Tomorrow morning. I've been invited to lead an art program out east. It's a good opportunity. Feels like the right time." Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes falling to the canvas. "And this? It's yours," he said gently. "The one from the exhibit? I thought it belonged with the person who inspired it." Her breath caught as she untied the paper and revealed the painting, the small cottage under the evening sky, its windows glowing with a golden warmth that seemed almost alive. She recognized the feeling it carried, the same quiet hope that had once filled their long-ago conversations. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But you didn't have to. I wanted to," he interrupted softly. "You once told me windows felt like stories waiting to be told. I suppose this one is mine and yours, in a way." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy. It was tender, filled with all the things that didn't need words. Finally, Ethan said, "I wanted to tell you something before I go." Sarah met his eyes, her heart steady but open. he continued. You were the first person who made me believe that kindness could be art, that listening, caring, noticing the small things. Those were forms of beauty too. I never forgot that. I just never had the chance to say thank you. Her eyes softened. You don't have to thank me, Ethan. You gave me something too. You reminded me that feeling deeply isn't weakness, it's what makes us human. He smiled then, quiet and sincere. Maybe that's why we met again to finish that conversation. She nodded, a small, understanding smile crossing her face. Maybe so. They walked together to the door, the sound of their footsteps echoing lightly across the empty hall. Outside, the evening breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine and rain. Do you ever think, Ethan asked softly, that some people cross paths just to help us remember what matters? Sarah looked up at the fading sky. I think. That's exactly why. He hesitated, his eyes warm but calm. You look happy, Sarah. I can see it in the way you talk about your work, your home. You've built something good. I have, she said, smiling faintly. And I'm grateful for it, for everything that led me here, even the hard parts. Ethan nodded. Then I'll go knowing that my small part in your story was worth something. She met his gaze, her voice soft but certain. There was no need for a long goodbye, just a quiet exchange of gratitude, a look that carried years of understanding, and a gentle peace that came from knowing neither of them needed more than that. When Ethan finally walked away, Sarah watched him disappear into the dusk, not with sadness, but with a calm acceptance. Some people are meant to stay. Others are meant to remind you who you are and then move on. That night, back at home, Sarah placed the painting on the living room wall. The soft golden windows seemed to glow in the lamplight. Filling the room with warmth, David came in from the kitchen holding 2 cups of tea. That's new, he said, smiling. Did you paint it? She shook her head gently. No, but it feels like it belongs here. He studied it for a moment, then handed her a cup. It's beautiful, peaceful, like something worth coming home to. Sarah smiled, her heart full in a quiet, steady way. Exactly that, she said. They sat together on the couch, sipping tea in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, and the room glowed with the same warm light as the painting. A reminder that love doesn't always burn bright and fierce. Sometimes it glows gently, faithfully, like a window left open to the night. And as Sarah leaned back, she realized the truth she had been searching for all along. That life's greatest beauty isn't found in what's lost or what could have been. It's found in the quiet grace of what remains.